A simple cleaning lady walks into a luxury cafe for a blind date, never imagining that on that night, her life would cross paths with someone who would change everything in an unexpected way. The alarm clock rang at 2 in the afternoon as always. Camille Davis slowly opened her eyes, accustomed to that feeling of living out of sync with the world. While most people were having lunch or returning from work, she was waking up to start her routine, which would only begin when the sun set. Her room at the back of Mrs. Martha's house was small, with just enough space for a single bed, a narrow wardrobe, and a nightstand she had found on the street. The window overlooked a grey wall, but at least there was a crack through which a sliver of natural light entered. Camille got up, stretched her aching back, and walked to the shared bathroom. The house was old, with worn parquet flooring and walls that told stories from other decades. Mrs. Martha was kind, a lady of almost 80, who rarely left her front room and spent her days listening to the radio. The rent was cheap because the space was minimal, and because the old lady liked having someone nearby, even if it was only in the afternoon before Camille left for work. After getting ready, Camille prepared a simple coffee in the kitchen. She ate 2 slices of bread with margarine, saving what she could. Her salary as a night cleaner at St. Vincent's Hospital didn't allow for luxuries. She divided her money between rent, food, transportation, and a small amount she religiously kept in an envelope inside her wardrobe. She wasn't entirely sure what for, but having that money there gave her a sense of security, as if she were building something, however slowly. At 3:30, as she was washing her cup, she heard a familiar voice coming from the kitchen window. It was Brenda, the neighbor from the townhouse next door, a woman in her early 30s, a hairdresser by profession, and owner of an infectious energy that Camille sometimes envied. "Brenda, you need to sleep more," Camille said with a slight smile, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Sleep is for the weak, darling." "Listen, I need to talk to you," Brenda replied, resting her elbows on her windowsill. Her hair was tied in a high bun, and she was wearing a floral bathrobe. "You're going to think I'm crazy, but I have a proposition." Camille raised her eyebrows. Brenda always had propositions. Some involved trying daring haircuts, others included invitations to parties in distant districts. Camille usually politely declined. "Don't look at me like that," Brenda insisted. "It's serious this time. I have a client at the salon, Mark, who's a sweetheart, and he has a single cousin, works in some administrative area, seems like a good guy. Polite, no vices, lives alone. He was saying he wanted to meet someone nice, and I immediately thought of you." Camille shook her head, chuckling softly. "Brenda, I don't have time for that. And you know how I am. I'm not good with those things. Those things have a name, Camille. Relationships, love, companionship. Things everyone deserves, including you. And before you say you don't deserve it, let me stop you. You absolutely do. No one can be as good as you and live as if they're invisible." Camille looked away, feeling the familiar discomfort rise in her chest. She didn't like it when Brenda spoke like that, with that mix of affection and pity. She knew her friend had good intentions, but it was hard to accept compliments when the mirror only showed exhaustion. "I don't even know how to behave on a date, Brenda. It's been years since I've been out with anyone. What if he expects someone different, someone more? I don't know, interesting." "Interesting is who you are, Camille. You save lives every night at that hospital." "I clean hallways, Brenda." "I don't save anything." "Do you really think that's all it is? How many times have you helped a nurse with something? How many times have you comforted a patient lost in the hallway?" "I know you do more than clean floors," Camille sighed. There was no point arguing with Brenda. The woman was as persistent as they come. "Just a coffee," Brenda continued. "An hour, tops. If it doesn't work out, you leave, and that's it. But at least try, okay, for me? Because I can't stand seeing you come home from work every night with that look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." "And I am," Camille thought, but said nothing. She just stood there looking at her friend, feeling something strange in her chest. Maybe it was fatigue, or maybe it was a secret desire to believe Brenda was right. That she deserved something more than that circular routine of work, sleep, and loneliness. "Okay," Camille finally said, almost not believing her own words. "But just a coffee. And if it's weird, I'm leaving." Brenda clapped her hands, excited. "You won't regret it, Camille. I'll talk to Mark today. We'll set it up for next Saturday, okay? Somewhere nice, but nothing too fancy. There's a new coffee shop that opened downtown, the Coffee Blossom. It looks pretty. 5 in the afternoon, what do you think? Camille nodded, already feeling regret knocking at the door. But the door was open now, and there was no turning back without disappointing Brenda. In the days that followed, Camille tried not to think too much about the date. During her nights at the hospital, as she mopped the hallway floors or emptied trash cans, the idea returned to her mind like a persistent whisper. Sometimes she would catch herself imagining what Mark's cousin would be like. Would he be tall? Would he have a nice smile? Would he be patient enough not to notice her calloused hands or simple clothes? On the Thursday before the date, while cleaning the emergency waiting room, a nurse named Patricia stopped beside her. The two had a cordial relationship, made of good mornings and good nights exchanged over the months. "Camille, are you all right?" Patricia asked, adjusting her badge on her scrubs. "Yes, I am. Why? You seem a bit distant these days. Any problems?" Camille shook her head. "No, everything's fine. Just tired," Patricia smiled. "If you need to talk, I'm around. And thank you for always keeping everything so clean. It makes a difference, you know?" People don't say it, but it does. Camille thanked her softly and continued her work. Patricia's words echoed, "It makes a difference. Did it really? Or was it just empty kindness, the kind people offer without much thought?" On Saturday, Camille woke up with a knot in her stomach. She spent the afternoon trying to choose what to wear, but her options were limited. She settled on a light blue blouse she had bought on sale months ago, and a pair of jeans that were still in good condition. She combed her hair, applied discreet lipstick, and looked at herself in the mirror. It wasn't a miraculous transformation, but it was the best she could do. At 4:30, she left the house. Brenda waved from the window, giving her a thumbs up. Camille forced a smile and began walking towards downtown Charleston. The coffee shop was about a 20-minute walk away, and she preferred to save the bus fare. As she walked through the streets of Charleston, she observed the typical hustle and bustle of a Saturday afternoon. Families strolling, couples holding hands, young people laughing loudly in front of shops. She felt like a stranger in that scene, someone watching the lives of others without ever truly being a part of them. When she arrived at the Coffee Blossom, she paused for a moment in front of the glass door. The place was elegant, with a modern facade and a golden sign. Through the glass she could see the cozy interior, with wooden tables, upholstered chairs, and soft lighting. It didn't seem like the kind of place she would enter alone. She took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, mixed with something sweet, immediately enveloped her senses. She looked around, searching for someone who might be Mark's cousin, but there was no one waiting alone. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us which city you are watching us from. We continue. Camille walked to the counter, feeling the weight of the gazes she imagined she was receiving. Perhaps they were just figments of her insecurity, but each step seemed to echo in the refined environment. There were a few customers scattered at tables, chatting softly or looking at their phones. No one seemed to be waiting for her. A young man behind the counter smiled politely. He wore a black apron and had a calm demeanor. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" Camille looked at the menu hanging on the wall behind him. The prices made her swallow hard. The simplest coffee cost $12. She had $20 in her wallet, but she needed to save at least half for emergencies. "An espresso, please," she said, trying to sound natural. "One moment," the young man replied, turning to the machine. Camille paid, took her coffee, and chose a table near the window, where she could observe the street. She sat down slowly, placing her bag on her lap. The coffee was hot, and she took small sips as she tried to control her nervousness. 15 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. She discreetly glanced at the door each time someone entered, but no one seemed to be looking for her. Perhaps he had given up. Or maybe Brenda had gotten the day wrong. Or maybe he had seen Camille from afar and decided she wasn't worth it. That last thought hurt more than she expected. Meanwhile, on the other side of the counter, Ronald Sterling watched the activity carefully. He had been there for about 2 hours, doing exactly what he always did when inaugurating a new Coffee Blossom unit, working anonymously, without revealing that he was the owner of the chain. He wore dark jeans, a light linen shirt, and the standard black apron. No one knew who he was, and that was exactly how he liked it. Ronald was 38 years old and had built the Coffee Blossom from scratch. He started with a small coffee shop in a remote district of Charleston, using savings from years of working at consulting firms. The business grew slowly but consistently. Today there were 15 units spread across South Carolina and North Carolina. He could be in an air-conditioned office, looking at spreadsheets and graphs, but he preferred to be there serving coffee, listening to customer conversations, feeling the real pulse of the business. It was while drying a cup that he noticed the woman sitting alone near the window. There was something about her that drew attention, but not in an obvious way. It wasn't conventional beauty or flashy clothes. It was something else. The way she held the cup with both hands, as if she needed the warmth. The way she looked out at the street with an expression that mixed expectation and resignation. Her shoulders slightly slumped, like someone accustomed to taking up little space. Ronald didn't usually get involved with customers beyond what was necessary, but something about that woman intrigued him. He picked up a clean napkin and walked over to her table. "Excuse me for interrupting," he said with a gentle smile. "I saw you've been here for a while. Are you waiting for someone?" Camille looked up, surprised. The man in front of her had light eyes, slightly messy brown hair, and a friendly expression. But she was already familiar with this type of approach. Men who approached with gentle excuses, wanting to strike up a conversation. It usually ended with an inconvenient invitation or an inappropriate comment. "Yes, I am," she replied dryly. "But I don't think they're coming." "I see," Ronald said, noticing the coldness in her voice. But he stayed there, not quite knowing why. "I brought an extra napkin just in case you need it. Sometimes coffee splashes." Camille took the napkin, still suspicious. "Thank you." There was a brief but not uncomfortable silence. Ronald should have returned to the counter, but instead he asked, "Is this your first time here?" "Yes," Camille replied. "A friend suggested it. And what did you think?" "It's pretty," she said, looking around. "But it's not really my style," Ronald smiled. "And what is your style?" Camille hesitated. She didn't expect the conversation to go this way. Simpler, I guess, less polished. "I understand," Ronald said, sitting in the empty chair opposite her without asking permission. Camille was slightly annoyed, but also curious. "You know, I like places like that, too. There's something honest about simple places. No fuss." "Do you work here?" Camille asked, noticing his apron. "I do," Ronald replied, which wasn't a lie. "I'm helping with team training. It's a recent opening, so there's a lot to adjust. It must be tiring." "It is, but I like it. I learn a lot talking to people. Every customer has a story, you know." "And you, what do you do?" Camille looked away. "In healthcare," she said, avoiding details. "Nurse?" "Not exactly, but I work in a hospital." Ronald nodded, respecting her evasiveness. "It must be tough." "It is, but someone has to do it." They talked for a few more minutes. The conversation had an unexpected lightness. Camille realized that, however much she tried to keep her guard up, there was something genuine about that man. He didn't ask intrusive questions, didn't look her up and down, didn't try to impress her. He just talked as if they had plenty of time and no urgent commitments. Ronald, for his part, was intrigued. He couldn't decipher that woman. There was an interesting contradiction in her. While she seemed to want to disappear, there was a contained strength, a silent intelligence that shone through the lines of her short answers. It was then that a sudden movement interrupted the moment. A white-haired lady, sitting near the entrance, quickly stood up and staggered. Before any employee could react, the woman collapsed to the floor unconscious. There was an instant of confusion. Some people stood up, others just looked startled. Camille didn't think. She dropped her bag on the chair and ran to the lady. She knelt beside her, checked her breathing by placing her hand near her nose and mouth, then checked her pulse in her neck. The woman was breathing, but her pulse was weak. "Does anyone have sugar?" Camille asked loudly but firmly. "And call emergency. She might be hypoglycemic." One of the employees brought sugar packets. Camille opened one, wet her finger and rubbed it on the lady's gums, repeating the process a few times. She grabbed a cushion from a nearby chair and placed it under the woman's head. She loosened the collar of her blouse and continued monitoring her breathing. Ronald watched everything from his feet, impressed. The transformation in Camille was complete. The shy and reserved woman had given way to someone confident, precise, almost authoritative in her gentleness. She knew exactly what to do, and she did it without hesitation. In a few minutes, the lady began to regain consciousness, blinking slowly. Camille smiled at her. "Calm down, you'll be fine. We've already called for help. Just breathe slowly." The ambulance arrived quickly. The paramedics thanked Camille for her quick action and took the lady for evaluation. When everything calmed down, Camille simply picked up her bag, avoided the curious glances of the other customers, and left the coffee shop without saying anything. She didn't wait for thanks. She didn't wait for recognition. She just left, as if it were a natural part of her day. Ronald stood in the middle of the room, still processing what he had just witnessed. He ran to the door, but when he reached the sidewalk, she had already disappeared into the Saturday afternoon crowd. He didn't know her name. He didn't have her number. He knew nothing beyond the fact that she worked in a hospital and drank espresso. He went back inside, thoughtful. One of the employees asked if everything was all right, and Ronald just nodded. But it wasn't. Something had changed in that brief encounter, something he couldn't name, but that he felt in his chest as an uncomfortable and strangely welcome restlessness. Camille arrived home with tired legs and a still racing heart. Not so much because of the situation with the lady in the coffee shop, as she had dealt with worse emergencies at the hospital, but because of the strange feeling the conversation with that man in the apron had left her with. She couldn't decide if she was annoyed with herself for letting her guard down or curious about who he really was. Brenda appeared at the window as soon as Camille entered the kitchen. "So, how was it?" "Tell me everything," Camille sighed, filling a glass with water. "He didn't show up, Brenda." "What do you mean he didn't show up? Mark assured me his cousin would be there." "Well, he wasn't. I waited for almost an hour. Then there was an emergency with a lady who fainted, and I helped. That was it." Brenda made a face of indignation. "That's outrageous. I'm going to talk to Mark first thing tomorrow." "What disrespect." "Forget it," Camille said, trying to sound indifferent. "It wasn't meant to be, that's all. But thanks for trying. Don't give up on me yet, you hear? I'll find someone worthy of you. You can count on it." Camille gave a weak smile and went to her room. She changed her clothes, lay down on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. The image of the man from the coffee shop came back to mind, the way he talked unhurriedly, the way he looked at her without apparent judgment. It was strange to miss someone she barely knew. In the following days, Camille returned to her routine. She woke up, had lunch, got ready, and went to the hospital. The nights were always the same. Silent corridors, the smell of disinfectant, the muffled sound of machines in distant rooms. She cleaned the floors with the same dedication as always, greeted the night staff and helped when necessary. On Wednesday, while mopping the second-floor hallway, she met Patricia again. The nurse was carrying a stack of patient charts and looked exhausted. "Camille, can you do me a favor?" Patricia asked. "I need someone to keep an eye on room 204 while I sort something out. It's just an elderly patient. He's stable, but I don't want to leave him alone. It'll be quick." "Of course," Camille replied, putting down her bucket and mop. She entered the room and found an elderly white-haired man lying in bed, looking out the window. He turned his head when he heard the door open. "Good evening," he said in a weak voice. "Good evening," Camille replied, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "The nurse will be right back. Do you need anything?" "No, thank you. I was just thinking about life. Old man stuff." Camille smiled. "You're not that old, sir. I'm 73, young lady. I think I can consider myself old, and you? What does a young lady do working nights in a hospital?" "I make a living, simple as that." The man nodded. "That's honest. I like honesty. You know, I spent my whole life working on things that didn't matter much. Paperwork, meetings, more paperwork. Now that I'm here, kind of broken, I realize that what really matters are people, like you who are here in the middle of the night taking care of strangers." Camille was speechless. She wasn't used to being seen that way. After a few minutes, Patricia returned and thanked her. Camille resumed her work, but the old man's words echoed. The following Saturday, Camille had an unexpected day off. She woke up early, not knowing what to do with her free time. She decided to walk downtown just to get out of the house. Without planning, her steps led her to the same street where the Coffee Blossom was located. She stopped on the other side of the sidewalk, watching the activity. She thought about going in, but hesitated. What would she say if she saw the man again? That she was just passing by? Before she could decide, the door opened and he came out carrying a box. Ronald. That was the name on the badge she hadn't noticed before. He saw her across the street and his face lit up with a smile. "Hey," he called, signaling for her to wait. He carefully crossed the street, still holding the box. "What a pleasant surprise. I thought I wouldn't see you again." Camille felt her face flush. I was just passing by. Glad you did." "Come in, have something. This time it's on me. Consider it a thank you for helping that lady the other day." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to, but I want to. Come on." Camille eventually gave in. They entered the coffee shop together, and Ronald led her to a table in the back. He left the box on the counter and returned with 2 hot teas. "I thought you'd prefer tea today. Am I right?" Camille nodded, surprised. He had noticed the details. Ronald sat opposite her and crossed his arms on the table. "You know, I kept thinking a lot about what happened that day. You were amazing. Where did you learn that?" "At work," Camille replied. "You end up seeing everything. You said you work in a hospital. Are you a nursing technician?" Camille hesitated. "No, I'm a cleaner." There was a brief silence. Camille expected to see some change in his expression, some sign of disdain or condescension. But Ronald merely nodded, as if the information was perfectly normal. "It must be tiring." "Night shifts, right?" "It is. But I got used to it. I've done some night shifts myself when I was starting the business. It's strange living outside everyone else's schedule." They talked for almost an hour. Camille found herself telling him things she didn't usually share. About Mrs. Martha's house, about the difficulties of saving money, about how she sometimes felt invisible at the hospital, even though she helped whenever she could. Ronald listened with genuine attention, asking questions that showed real interest. When Camille finally got up to leave, Ronald walked her to the door. "Come back anytime you want," he said. "Seriously, even if I'm not here, the staff knows you're welcome." "Thank you," Camille said, feeling something strange in her chest. A mixture of gratitude and confusion. That became an unexpected routine. Camille started stopping by the coffee shop on Saturdays, always in the late afternoon, when she finished an errand or simply wanted to get out of the house. Ronald was always there or appeared shortly after. They talked about various subjects, movies neither of them had time to watch, places in Charleston Camille had never visited, funny stories about customers and patients. Ronald, for his part, found himself increasingly interested in that woman. There was a layer of mystery about her that intrigued him. It wasn't just her discreet beauty or silent intelligence. It was the way she faced life, with a mixture of resignation and resilience, like someone who had learned not to expect much, but who still didn't give up completely. One evening, after almost a month of these encounters, Ronald was in his apartment looking out the window. He was trying to concentrate on a presentation for investors, but his mind kept returning to Camille. He picked up his phone and hesitated. He didn't have her number. He had never asked, afraid of seeming intrusive, but he needed to see her again, and waiting until next Saturday seemed like an eternity. It was then that he remembered something. Brenda. The name had appeared on a contact list of one of his partners, Mark, who was his cousin. Mark had mentioned something about setting up a blind date for a cousin. Ronald felt his stomach churn. Could it have been that Saturday? The Saturday he met Camille? He picked up the phone and called Mark. "Cousin, I need to ask you something. That date you set up for me, remember? At the Coffee Blossom." "Oh man, I'm sorry. I completely forgot to go. A problem came up at work and I ended up letting you down. Was it really bad?" Ronald was silent, processing the information. "No, it wasn't," he replied slowly. "Actually, it was interesting." "What do you mean?" "Nothing." "Never mind. Do you have the contact information for the person who was supposed to be there?" "Camille." "I have Brenda's number. Who's her friend? Why?" Ronald hung up the phone, his mind in a whirl. It was her. Camille was the person he was supposed to meet that day, and neither of them knew. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us which city you are watching us from. We continue. Camille was in Mrs. Martha's room helping change the bedsheets when Brenda appeared at the door with a magazine in her hand and a strange expression on her face. It was a Saturday morning, and Camille had woken up early to help the old lady before going out. "Camille, you need to see something," Brenda said, entering unceremoniously. "Sorry to interrupt, Mrs. Martha, but it's important." Camille frowned. "What is it?" Did something happen? Brenda opened the magazine to a marked page. It was a report on successful entrepreneurs in South Carolina. The article highlighted 3 local businessmen, and in the center of the page was a large photo of a man in a suit, smiling at the camera. Camille felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. It was Ronald. The caption read, "Ronald Sterling, CEO of the Coffee Blossom chain, bets on customer experience and innovation to expand business." The text went on to describe how he had built the company from scratch, how he visited stores disguised as an employee to better understand customer needs, and how he planned to open 10 more units in the next 2 years. Camille read and reread, unable to fully process it. That man who talked to her on Saturdays, who served tea, who wore an apron and talked about night shifts as if they were a common part of his life, was the owner of all that. He wasn't just an employee. He wasn't someone like her. He was the CEO, the owner, the boss of hundreds of people. "It's him, isn't it?" Brenda asked, observing her friend's reaction. "The coffee shop guy." Camille didn't answer. She just closed the magazine and handed it back to Brenda. She felt her chest tighten, her breathing becoming irregular. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was the feeling of having been deceived, of having opened parts of herself to someone who was never honest about who he really was. "Camille, calm down," Brenda said, touching her friend's arm. "Maybe he just didn't have a chance to tell you." "A chance?" Camille let out a dry laugh. "Brenda, I told him about my life, about how hard it is to pay rent, about work, about feeling invisible. And he just stood there, pretending to be a regular employee, pretending to understand, as if we were equals. But maybe he really does understand. The article says he started from scratch. It's not the same thing, Brenda. He chose to disguise himself. He chose not to tell me the truth. And I, like an idiot, believed I had found someone who saw me as a person, not as, I don't know, a charity project." Camille left Mrs. Martha's room and went to her own, closing the door. She sat on the bed and put her hands on her face. The tears came slowly, silently. It wasn't just the discovery about Ronald. It was everything. It was the constant feeling of always being a few steps behind, of never being enough, that even the good moments came with some hidden catch. She spent the rest of the day in her room, ignoring Brenda's knocks on the door. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want comfort. She just wanted to be alone with her disappointment. On Sunday, she had to go to the hospital, even though it was her day off, to cover a colleague's shift who had called in sick. She entered through the back, changed in the locker room, and started work without speaking to anyone. She kept her head down, her movements automatic, her mind anywhere but the present. It was Patricia who noticed something was wrong. "Camille, are you all right?" "You seem distant." "I'm just tired," Camille replied without looking at the nurse. "If you want to talk, I'm here." Camille thanked her, but said nothing. She continued working until dawn, and when she finally left the hospital, she felt the weight of exhaustion in her bones. But it was a welcome weight. At least when she was too tired, she had no energy to think about Ronald. The following Saturday arrived. Camille avoided leaving the house. She stayed in her room, reading an old book she had borrowed from Mrs. Martha, trying to distract herself. But with each page her thoughts returned. Had he noticed her absence? Was he worried? Or had he already forgotten her, too busy with his business and his next expansions? It was on Monday, while cleaning the third-floor hallway of the hospital, that one of the security guards approached her. "Camille, there's a man downstairs asking for you. Said it's important." Camille felt her heart race. "Who is it?" Didn't give his name. "But he's well-dressed, seems like a fine gentleman." She went down to the entrance lobby with trembling legs. And there he was, Ronald. He wore dress pants and a white shirt, no tie. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes that she had never noticed before. When he saw her, his face lit up with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Camille, can we talk?" he asked, taking a few steps towards her. She crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "What do you want?" "I want to explain, please. Just give me a few minutes." "There's nothing to explain, Ronald. Or should I call you Mr. Sterling? Since that's what people should call you, right?" Ronald closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. "I know you're upset, and you have every right to be, but I didn't lie to you. I work at the Coffee Blossom. I really am part of the team training. I didn't tell you everything. You pretended to be someone you're not, Ronald. You let me open up my life. Tell you things I don't tell anyone, thinking I was talking to someone who would understand me. And all that time you were there in your disguise, evaluating everything as if it were some kind of social experiment. It wasn't like that, Camille. I swear it wasn't. When I met you, I wasn't thinking about business or evaluations. I was thinking about you. The way you helped that lady, the way you talk, the way you see the world. I wanted to get to know the real you. And I was afraid that if you knew who I was, you would treat me differently. And you think I don't have the right to do that? To treat you differently, knowing that you omitted who you really are? Ronald took a step forward, his voice softening. You're right. You have every right. But please don't think I did this with bad intentions. I just wanted to be seen as a person, not as a company owner. I wanted someone to talk to me without ulterior motives. And you did that. You treated me as an equal. And it was the best thing that happened to me in a long time. Camille felt tears threaten, but she held them back. Ronald, you don't understand. You never will. You can play at being an employee for a few hours. But at the end of the day, you go back to your comfortable life. I don't have that option. This is my life. And I'm not an experiment. I'm not someone you meet to feel humble or connected to the common folk. I never thought that, Camille, never. Then what did you think? That it would be romantic? That the poor cleaner would fall in love with the rich businessman and everything would end happily ever after? This isn't a soap opera, Ronald. This is real life. And in real life, people like me don't mix with people like you. Camille turned and started walking back to the elevator. Ronald tried to follow her, but she raised her hand without looking back. Don't come after me, please, just leave me alone. The elevator doors closed and Camille finally let the tears fall. She leaned against the cold elevator wall and took a deep breath, trying to compose herself before reaching her floor. She knew she had been harsh with Ronald, perhaps even unfair, but it was the only way to protect herself, to avoid getting hurt even more. The following days were the most difficult Camille had lived in a long time. It wasn't just Ronald's absence, but the absence of something she didn't even know she needed. The feeling of being seen, of having someone to talk to without masks, without judgment. Even if it had been built on a fragile foundation of half-truths, it had been real for her. And now without it, the silence became oppressive again. At work, Camille became even more discreet. She avoided long conversations, kept her head down, did her job with the same efficiency as always, but without the emotional involvement she used to have. Patricia tried to strike up a conversation a few times, but realized Camille needed space. Brenda, for her part, didn't give up so easily. She appeared at the window almost every day, trying to get a word out of her friend. Camille, you need to stop punishing yourself for this. The guy liked you. Still likes you, I'm sure. It doesn't matter, Brenda, Camille replied, washing a pot in the sink. It won't work out. We live in different worlds. Different worlds don't stop two people from connecting. Do you think every couple is the same? That everyone comes from the same place? It's different. You don't understand, Brenda sighed. Maybe I don't completely understand. But I know you were happy. I saw it in your eyes. And now you're unhappy again. And why? Because of pride? It's not pride, Brenda. It's self-preservation. I can't put myself in a situation where I'll always be at a disadvantage. I'll always be the one who needs to prove I'm good enough. I can't handle that. Meanwhile, Ronald was also facing his own demons. He couldn't concentrate on work. Meetings seemed endless. Reports were just blurs of meaningless numbers. His mind was always on Camille. The way she had looked at him in the hospital, with that mixture of hurt and disappointment. The words she had said, which hurt more than he expected. He tried to call Brenda, but she was politely firm. Ronald, I know you like her, but you need to respect her space now. You hurt her, even if unintentionally, and she needs time to process it. But I want to make things right, Brenda. I want her to know it wasn't a game. That I really care. Then show it with actions, not with words. And please, don't show up at the hospital again. That will only make things worse. Ronald spent weeks trying to find a way to approach her without being intrusive. He thought about sending flowers, but that seemed too cliché. He thought about writing a letter, but the words never came out right. Everything seemed insufficient, inadequate, too small to express what he felt. It was during a meeting with his social responsibility team that an idea emerged. The Coffee Blossom had a community recognition program where they honored people who made a difference in their areas. It was something small but significant, a certificate, a small ceremony, and sometimes a donation to a cause chosen by the honored person. Ronald thought of Camille, the day she saved the lady in the coffee shop, the way she worked every day at the hospital, making a difference in ways most people never noticed. She deserved to be recognized, not by him, but by the community. Not as a favor, but as a legitimate right. He coordinated everything carefully. He asked the program coordinator to contact the hospital, verify the reports about Camille, and formalize the nomination. He made sure his name didn't appear anywhere. He didn't want her to think it was an attempt at manipulation or to buy her forgiveness. The certificate was delivered to the hospital on a Thursday afternoon. Camille was cleaning the waiting room when the administrative director called her into his office. She went with a racing heart, fearing some problem. "Camille, please sit," the director said, a middle-aged man with round glasses. "I have good news. The Coffee Blossom Foundation contacted us to honor you. It seems you were nominated for helping a person in an emergency situation at one of their establishments." Camille felt her blood run cold. The Coffee Blossom, Ronald. It had to be him. "I don't want it," she said too quickly. The director blinked, surprised. "What do you mean you don't want it? It's legitimate recognition, Camille. You deserve it. Several employees here have witnessed your dedication over the years. I myself have seen you help in situations that weren't your responsibility. But he's the one who nominated me, wasn't he? The owner of the company." "Actually, no. The person who made the nomination was the daughter of the lady you helped. She contacted the foundation and asked for you to be recognized. The process was handled by the social responsibility team, with no direct involvement from the board. So it's all documented here if you want to see." Camille took the papers and read them. It was true. There were testimonies, reports, dates, nothing directly linking it to Ronald. The recognition was genuine, and yet something inside her resisted, because she knew that in some way he was behind it, even if it was just by creating the program, even if it was just by existing. She accepted the certificate with a dry thank you. She went back to work, but her mind was far away. She put the paper in her locker in the changing room and tried not to think about it anymore. But that night, alone in Mrs. Martha's room, Camille picked up the certificate again and read every word. There were no exaggerations, no empty compliments, just simple, direct recognition. For the act of compassion and competence in an emergency situation. For dedicated work in healthcare, and for the silent difference made in the lives of others. Something inside her stirred. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of a crack in the wall she had built. The following Saturday, Camille did something she hadn't planned. She walked to the Coffee Blossom. She didn't go in. She just stood outside, observing through the glass. Ronald wasn't there. There were other employees, other customers, other conversations. Life went on as it always did, but something had changed. Camille realized that perhaps the problem wasn't just Ronald omitting who he was. The problem was herself. It was the fear of believing she deserved something good. It was the fear of truly being seen and, even so, being chosen. Because if he chose her, knowing everything, knowing her difficulties, her limitations, her insecurities, then she would have no more excuses. She could no longer hide behind the idea that she wasn't enough. She turned and started walking back home. She passed a park where children played and couples strolled. She sat on a bench watching life happen around her. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to think about Ronald without anger. She thought about their conversations, their smiles, the way he listened to her unhurriedly. She thought that perhaps he too was trying to protect himself, that perhaps he too was afraid of not being accepted for who he really was. It didn't mean she was ready to forgive, but it meant she was willing to consider that perhaps the story hadn't ended the right way. That perhaps there were still chapters to be written, if both had enough courage to continue. 2 weeks passed since Camille had stood in front of the Coffee Blossom without going in. During that time, something inside her began to change almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but small shifts in the way she faced things. She began to accept Patricia's compliments at the hospital without looking away. She started talking more with Mrs. Martha in the afternoons before work. She began to consider that perhaps she deserved to occupy more space in the world. It was on a Friday night, while cleaning the fourth-floor hallway, that Camille found a young patient sitting alone in the waiting room. The girl was 20 at most and was crying softly, trying to hide her face with her hands. Camille hesitated, but something made her approach. "Is everything all right?" Camille asked, sitting beside her. The girl quickly wiped away her tears. "Sorry, I'm waiting for news about my dad. He's been in surgery for hours, and no one has come to say anything. It must be a long surgery, but if no one has called you yet, it's usually a good sign. It means everything is going as expected." The girl nodded but remained tense. Camille stayed there for a few minutes, just keeping her company. She didn't say anything profound or motivational. She just remained present. And when the girl finally calmed down, she thanked her with a weak smile. "Are you a nurse?" "No, I'm a cleaner. But I've worked here for a long time. I've seen many situations like this, and most of them end well. Thank you for staying with me." Camille returned to work with a strange feeling in her chest, a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. She realized that even without knowing it, she had built a life that mattered. It wasn't a grand life or one full of visible achievements, but it was a life that touched other lives. And that had value. It always had. But she had never allowed herself to feel that it was enough. The following Saturday, Camille woke up with a decision made. She didn't know if it was the right decision, but it was the only one that made sense at the moment. She got ready more carefully than usual, took the certificate from the Coffee Blossom Foundation that was stored in her drawer, and walked to the coffee shop. It was 4 in the afternoon. Business was quiet. Camille pushed the door open and entered, smelling the familiar scent of coffee and cinnamon. She looked around, searching for Ronald, but he wasn't there. She felt a pang of disappointment, but also relief. She sat at the same table where everything had begun, near the window. An attendant approached with a smile. "Good afternoon. What would you like?" "A tea, please." "Any hot one." The young woman nodded and went to prepare the order. Camille looked out the window, watching people pass by on the street. She was so absorbed in her own thoughts that she didn't notice when someone sat in the chair opposite her. "May I sit?" a familiar voice asked. Camille quickly turned her head. It was Ronald. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans, and a simple t-shirt, and seemed to have lost a little weight. His light eyes were fixed on her with a mixture of hope and fear. "You may," Camille replied, feeling her heart race. There was a long silence. The attendant brought the tea and a coffee for Ronald, who thanked her without taking his eyes off Camille. "I didn't expect to see you here," he finally said. "I didn't expect to come either," Camille admitted, holding the cup with both hands. "But I needed to. I needed to try to understand some things." "And did you?" "I'm trying." Camille took a deep breath. "Ronald, I judged you too quickly. I put you in a box and decided you were the villain of the story. But the truth is I was scared. Scared to believe that someone like you could like someone like me. Scared of being disappointed again." Ronald reached his hand across the table but stopped halfway, waiting for permission. "May I?" Camille looked at his hand and after a moment placed hers on top. His fingers were warm, firm. "Camille, I never wanted to deceive you," Ronald said, his voice laden with emotion. "When I met you, I wasn't thinking about who I was or who you were. I was just thinking about you, the way you moved through the world with so much dignity, even carrying so much weight. And I know I omitted part of my life, but I did it because for the first time in years, someone saw me just as Ronald. Not as the CEO, not as the successful businessman, not as someone who has all the answers, just as me. But you have to understand how it was for me, Ronald. I opened up my life to you. I told you things I never tell anyone. And all the while you had this other life I didn't know about. How can I trust you after that?" Ronald gently squeezed her hand. "You're right. And I can't change what happened. But I can promise you one thing. From now on, no secrets, no omissions. If you give me a chance, I'll show you who I really am. With everything, the good and the bad, the achievements and the insecurities, everything." Camille felt tears threaten, but this time they weren't tears of hurt. They were tears of relief, of hope, of something new beginning to grow in the place of what had broken. "I don't know if it will be easy, Ronald. We come from very different places. People will judge. They'll say it doesn't make sense. Let them say it, Ronald replied with a soft smile. I don't care what people think. I care what you think, and if you think it's worth trying, I promise I'll do everything to make it work. Not because I want to save you or change you, but because you make me want to be a better person. You remind me of what's truly important. Camille looked at him, at that man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and messily, and she realized that perhaps fate hadn't been mistaken that first day. Perhaps it had just chosen a more winding, more difficult path, but ultimately a truer one. So we start over, Camille asked, allowing herself to smile for the first time in weeks. The right way this time? The right way, Ronald agreed. No disguises, no lies. Just the two of us, trying to figure out how this works. They stayed talking until the coffee shop closed. They talked about everything they hadn't talked about before. Ronald told her about the pressure of keeping the business growing, about sleepless nights, about the constant fear of failure. Camille told him about the dreams she had kept in boxes, about her secret desire to study nursing, about how she sometimes felt trapped in a life she hadn't chosen, but that she also didn't know how to change. And for the first time it was a conversation between equals, not CEO and cleaner, not rich and poor, but two people trying to find meaning in a world that rarely made sense. When they left the coffee shop, it was already night. Ronald walked Camille to the bus stop, but she refused his offer of a ride. I need to go slowly, she explained. I need to be sure this is real, that it's not just a fairy tale that will disappear when the sun rises. It's real, Camille. As real as you want it to be. Then let's find out together, she said, lightly kissing his cheek before getting on the bus. In the following months, Camille and Ronald built something neither of them expected. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, insecurity, differences that seemed insurmountable, but there were also moments of discovery, shared laughter, a connection that went beyond circumstances. Ronald helped Camille enroll in a nursing technical course, offering support without being intrusive. Camille helped Ronald reconnect with the essence of what he had built, constantly reminding him that success wasn't in the numbers, but in the people. And on a Sunday afternoon, almost a year after that first blind date that never happened as planned, Camille was sitting at the same table in the Coffee Blossom, now wearing her nursing student uniform. Ronald sat opposite her with 2 hot teas. You know what's funny? Camille said, smiling. If that date had happened the right way, it probably wouldn't have worked out. Why? Ronald asked, intrigued. Because we would have tried to be who we thought the other wanted. You would have been the polite businessman, and I would have been the shy girl trying to impress. We would never have truly known each other. Ronald took her hand across the table. Then I thanked the universe for messing up the plans. Me too. And so, amidst cups of tea and unhurried conversations, Camille and Ronald discovered that the best encounters are those that happen without a script. That true love is not born in perfect settings or with rehearsed personas, but in the courage to show oneself completely, with all flaws and truths, and still be chosen. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Camille and Ronald's story has touched your hearts. Love doesn't always happen the way we plan, but sometimes winding paths lead us exactly where we need to be. If you enjoyed this story and want to continue this exciting journey with us, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating narratives that explore the complexity of relationships, overcoming challenges, and hope. You can find it right here. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Every day we bring unique stories that reflect real life with its difficulties, joys, and new beginnings. And you, what did you think of this story? Have you experienced anything similar? Tell us in the comments. We love to hear your opinion and your own stories. Until the next narrative, and remember, it's never too late to start over and believe in true love.